Hey everyone, welcome back here to Techstrong TV. You know, it's starting to sound a lot like RSAC season. Oh, not Christmas. Christmas was the month before already. Wow, time is flying. And RSA is almost here. So if RSA is almost here, you know we're going to be talking to my friend Cecilia Marinier. Cecilia is the Vice President of Innovation and Scholars for RSAC, the people behind the RSAC conference. We have some branding I want to reinforce there with you all. Behind the title, though, and all the fancy names and acronyms, Cecilia is the lady who's been running the RSAC Innovation Sandbox Contest, the Sandbox Village, I think it's called, and Innovation Villages, and so much more. It's really grown up over the years. But Cecilia is kind of the driving force behind it. Cecilia, it's great to have you on again. How are you?
I am great. Thank you, Alan. I appreciate always coming on. Really excited to touch base with you and the audience right before our conference starts. Such a great time. Thank you.
Absolutely. We're about a month out. And I know, was it last week you announced the 10 finalists for this year's Innovation Sandbox, yes?
Yes, it is. They just announced it. I have to tell you, like, that part right beforehand is so unnerving, but it's so fun. And all of the top 10 are so excited about being recognized by the industry leaders, by those 5 judges as who should be on our stage. So it's such a great time.
Absolutely. And it's more than just the recognition. There's a fair bit of cash involved too.
There is this year. And as in last year, as in what we see in the foreseeable future, each of the top 10 are going to have a $5 million investment from Crosspoint. So they are not only getting the leg up of a platform to amplify their message, but then they're also getting the funding to actually support that so that they can really use that amplification and go to market with their products.
Excellent. Cecilia, I feel like we jumped out ahead, though, without laying the right foundation.
Okay, let's go back.
There might be people out here who maybe are not familiar with Innovation Sandbox. They're not familiar with all of the great activities that you and your team, put forth. The culmination of it is RSAC Conference Week, but it's almost like a year-round chore at this point. Running these and selecting them and organizing and doing it. For people who aren't familiar with the whole program, Cecilia, educate them a little bit. What's involved here?
So thank you for giving me this chance. So RSAC's innovation programming is very broad, and the whole goal is to kind of offer and a platform for a lot of startups to come out and meet with the industry leaders, the decision makers, and kind of showcase what are the kind of solutions that they're taking on to solve for the vexing problems our industry faces. And so what we've done is created beyond the Innovation Sandbox Contest, which is 21 years old, and has named big names that came from nowhere, and now you have them in your vernacular, such as, Big Idea, Exonius, Wiz. All of those companies have now, been part of the Innovation Sandbox first, and then have grown to that. We created another contest called Launchpad, where we ask venture capitalists to actually identify 3 startups. And guess what today is? It's the day we announce our 3 startups for that as well. So go for the Launchpad. Really awesome to see the caliber of companies coming in for that. But we don't stop there because it's not enough. There's so much happening in this industry, and we want to be able to give more companies a platform. So we've also started this area called Early Stage Expo. We've expanded it from 50 companies. Now it's up to 78 companies, and that runs on Tuesday through Thursday. We have a whole track aimed at investors and entrepreneurs, where we have 9 other sessions that will be talking about trends in the industry. What are the venture capitalists looking at? How to get money, how to get funded, all of these kind of content pieces that also have amplification. And then finally, what we've done is we've created another thing that we're doing this year, which is private, but super fun of trying it out. It's called the CISO Entrepreneur Breakfast, where we're connecting CISOs that are coming from our closed door programming to startups out in the industry. So 15 of them are going to go and meet with these CISOs and see about becoming design partners. So that's what's happening at conference. Additionally, we also created something that was year round, which we call Innovation Showcase, where we also identify some startups that we can give a platform to. So that's just on the innovation suite. And you talked about villages earlier. I'm happy to talk about Sandbox/villages whenever you want.
Well, you already did. The cat's out of the bag, my friend. We got to finish that thought. Don't tease people. What are we talking about here?
So, if you think about how the industry has developed, there's a lot of people who are working on the entry level. And that for me is like my heart goes out to those people. Those are my security scholars. They're the college day. But then as they start to move up the chain, they become into the decision makers, right? Well, one of the areas that we've tried to combine these two forces, the early entry, mid-stage career and decision makers, is this area called the villages. It was previously called Sandbox, and don't get confused because it's not Innovation Sandbox. And that's the whole reason we made a decision to go, let's go back to the villages. So the villages are areas where it's hands-on activities. It has volunteers who are sitting there ready to have a conversation with you. If you're interested in IoT or you're interested in AI, you can go talk to those village representatives. And it's really super fun to be part of that also. Then there's a new place that's called Connection Hub, but I'm going to leave that one, Alan. This is my cliffhanger. I'm leaving that for Britta and Linda.
Excellent. You know what? I think I have Britta and Linda next week sometime.
Okay. Awesome.
So I'll be sure I quiz them on that and ask them about that, but that'll be fun as well. Cecilia, that is a great overview. But as I mentioned, we did announce the 10 finalists.
Yep.
It was last week, right? It was,
yes, last Tuesday, the 10th.
Yeah. So it's a week already. Well, let's first of all for people who want to get more information on this year's 10 finalists, it's at the RSAC site.
Right. So what you can do is when you go to the when you go to the RSAC conference website for this event this year, and you go under programs, you'll see Innovation Sandbox, you'll see Launchpad, you'll see all these others. And that's how you can get to the top 10. You can also see the banner at the top for the next week or so, where they say, come check out the top 10 winners, and you can go learn more about who they are and what they do.
As you mentioned, every one of them is guaranteed a $5 million investment from Crosspoint. But Cecilia, not to put you on the spot, but let's see how deep you are into the Innovation Sandbox this year. Can you give us maybe the top 10 lists and a little bit about what you know about them or what you might want to say? Or
okay.
Might be a bit
You're going to have
much.
to cut out a little bit here because I got to go pick up my my little cheat sheet here.
That's
give me
okay.
one
I expected you would have a cheat sheet. You would. I have very high regard for you, Cecilia, but if you were able to do all 10 off the top of your head, I think I'd fall out of my chair. But go ahead.
All right. So here's what I'll say in general. I mean, there are 10 really interesting companies. And of course, this year is highly focused on on AI. I mean, I think all of them have AI as part of the solution, whether it's to improve productivity, whether it's to protect against AI, you're going to see, AI leakage or something. You're going to see AI as center stage. But the companies range, I like them a lot. I'm very excited. So we have Charm Security, Clearly AI, Crash Override, Fig Security, Jordy AI, Glide Identity, Token Security, Realm Labs, and ZeroPath. How'd I do? Did I
Excellent.
get 10?
I think you're almost in alphabetical order there as well. That's pretty darn impressive.
Oh, you know what? I didn't. I did 9 Humanics. Goodness gracious. So sorry about that.
You
Humanics.
left out. We did 9, and then there's Humanics.
Okay, there's 10. That's 10.
to give folks an idea of really just how special it is. to be one of the 10 finalists? I think there's two things that we need to look at. First of all, your mileage may vary. Past performance should not be your guide. That's when you're buying cars, electric cars, or gas mileage. Right. But when it comes to the RSAC Innovation Sandbox, past performance does matter. You mentioned some of the companies that over the years, and this is, I forget now, is this the 21st year?
21st year. And There has been so one of the numbers that we state frequently is it's $18.1 billion in investment for the top 10 over the 21 years. Really impressive numbers. Additionally, so if you think about the fact that we've only had maximum of 200 companies, because one year we only had 7, I know that sounds crazy, but that was in a strange year in 2007. So there was only 7 of them, but over 100 of these companies have been acquired. So it is telling that, we've had several that have gone IPO, several that have, most of them have been acquired, or they're just doing extremely well. Like if you think of Exonius, for example, is doing exceptionally well, big ideas, big names. More recently, so like Callan Security was acquired by Palo Alto Networks, and yes. Oliver's latest company, Pangea, was just acquired by CrowdStrike. So again, like the track record on this particular contest is strong. So if you get on this stage, it's you know what it is, Alan? It's helping these companies rise above the noise, because they have 5 industry leaders as judges who are actually identifying important companies that really will likely make it, because they're all working from different perspectives. You've got, Dave Chen coming from Morgan Stanley, who's doing the banking side of it. You've got Larry Feinsmith coming from JP Morgan Chase, who's doing the global overall. JP Morgan Chase is one of the largest banks in the world, but more importantly, it's also like one of the companies that does help and partner with startups. You have Nazem Raze, who is the CISO at Verizon. You have Nilu Razi, who is who currently is in a venture capital group situation, but she actually has a lot of background in national security. And so her whole perspective is like, what is the government thinking? And then your final one is Paul Kocher, who is an incredibly deep researcher, has technical knowledge that is testing all these companies out. But more importantly, he also sold his company. So he knows exactly what it takes for an entrepreneur to go from bootstrap to sale. So those guys are our industry leaders. They're choosing the companies who will be on that stage. So by going in and seeing the Innovation Sandbox Contest, you're actually already having like this group of people who are really invested into what's happening in the marketplace overall, identify companies that are really strong you should pay attention to.
Absolutely. Cecilia, so we looked back. Let's look forward into the present. I don't know if you have these numbers and if you're allowed to mention them, but how many companies apply to or are considered to get to the 10 finalists?
That's a great question. We don't actually put that number out there, but I can tell you that the down select is, there's there's hundreds of companies that have applied in this year. That's what I'll say. How's that?
I would imagine. Well, not for nothing, but every day it seems my inbox is inundated with new cyber companies coming out of stealth and raising ridiculous amounts of seed money or round A's, like bigger than I've ever seen. So I'm not surprised to hear that as well. You know what we didn't mention? For people who are going to be out at RSA in San Francisco at the Moscone Center.
Yeah.
When is Innovation Sandbox being held?
So
and
Innovation. Oh, okay. So Innovation Sandbox and all of the innovation activities will actually be on the second level of Moscone South. We start on early morning, March 23rd, all the way through that for Thursday, the 26th. So in order to get into any of the innovation events, you have to have an Expo Plus or All Access badge. But if you want to just go to Early Stage Expo, you can get in there with just a Expo only badge. But you don't miss all the contests. And this year, Alan, you have to come because I am doing something super fun. We're doing something super fun. I'm not going to tell you. Another
All
cliffhanger.
right.
You
Well,
got to be in the room.
on Monday, I'm one level above you. I'm up on the third floor, I think. You're right
Oh,
below
that's right.
us.
That's right.
But I'll try to run down there and look for you. If give me, well,
It
no one's
starts at
watching right now.
9:40. It starts at 9:40. If you can sneak away for
All
lunch,
right,
or
I
something,
could
come on
probably
in.
sneak out there because ours starts early, and I just got to say hello to everyone, warming up, and then I'm actually the doorman scanning people. But look, this is what happens when you run your own thing. You're chief cook and bottle washer, right? But I'll try to get someone else to do the scanning. I'll run downstairs to see you.
I would love it.
Um,
I would love it. And don't think that we who are working at conference are any different, my friend. We're jack of all trades, man. You see us
you
out
got to
there,
do
you see
whatever
me out
needs
there,
to
you
get
can
done.
exactly. We're all in it together. It's so fun. I'm
Absolutely.
really excited to see everybody this year. Please, if you see me, come up and say hello. I'd love it.
Absolutely. 9:40, and then I'll make it back up because I think we have David Brin going off at 10 or 10:30. And this is a year where sci-fi is becoming real. We live in a world of sci-fi where Asimov's laws of robotics and Philip K. Dick's, electric daydreams of androids, they're like real. It's really happening. Who thought it would happen in our lifetime? Cecilia, if no one tells you, let me tell you, you do a great job running this Innovation and Scholars program. Every year it grows and gets better and better. It's like, it gets better with age. And
Me too, I'm hoping. I'll have to ask my husband.
I wasn't going to say it because, I'm married and I know better than I know where not to go. I get in
Okay, wait,
trouble
Alan,
when I do
I
that.
want to make one small plug for my security scholars who on Wednesday
Go
will
ahead.
be 22 of them this year. So that's over a third are showing off their posters on Wednesday in the North Lobby. So I would also love for any of your colleagues, friends, whatever, check out their posters. They're on the website. You go to Security Scholars, you check on the posters, or you can actually look under agenda for the poster session. They'll have a link to it. These guys are working on some really important topics and areas of focus. So we should give them some love. Love to see.
Absolutely. And there, what was it, about 2 years ago or just last year you started Scholars?
Oh, no, I've been doing the Security Scholars since 2016. Ooh, but we took a couple years off, and that was we lost a little momentum because of COVID. But
right.
now
That's why that's what it is.
Yeah,
It was a
no,
reset.
but we're back. We're back stronger than
baby.
ever.
Good to hear it. Cecilia, thank you so much for coming on here. I dropped my AirPod. But thank you. Keep up the great work. I can't wait. We're going to reach out to some of these finalist companies and see if we get them here on Techstrong TV between now and the end of next month. Well, between now and the conference. But sounds like you got another bumper crop. It's going to be a great event. And it's not just the Innovation Sandbox. It's the entire Innovation and Scholars program. So do check it out. Cecilia, we'll talk to you again soon, and we'll hopefully see you in person in March in San Francisco.
Absolutely. I'll see you there.
All righty. We're going to take a break on Techstrong TV. We'll be back here in a minute.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Eric Tschetter, who's the chief architect for Imply, and we're having a little chat about, the rise of observability warehouses. It seems like we're actually pulling in more data than ever. We've instrumented applications, but now what? Eric, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
All right. So walk us through how this is all evolving. I mean, for a while there, we couldn't instrument many things because it cost a lot of money and it was just hard. And now we have OpenTelemetry and, it costs less and maybe it's not quite as easy as we want it to be, but apparently we are pulling all this data in these days. So where are we on this journey?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got OpenTelemetry. It's pulling in data. I mean, we've also got AI now coming, generating a whole bunch more data and everything. And it's all kind of dumping into things, but kind of taking a step back on where we are. We at Imply, we've been around for about 10 years. We've worked with open source column-oriented kind of database for a while, and we saw across our customers that they fit kind of two profiles, one in the business intelligence world and one in the observability world. And we realized that in the business intelligence world, there's this clean separation between layers. You've got your visualization layer with Tableau and Looker on top of your data layer with your SQL data warehouses, Snowflake, Databricks, all that, and your data acquisition ETL tools with Fivetran, dbt, Informatica, things over there. But then when we looked at the observability world, we realized that it's all kind of verticalized stacks. It's you've got Kibana on top of Elastic on top of Logstash, or Grafana on Loki with OpenTelemetry. And we realized that, looking back at the history of business intelligence, it got to where it is through a natural market evolution. And in the observability world, in this observability and security data world, really, it's just the beginning of that market evolution. OpenTelemetry really it kicks it off. It's starting to decouple the data acquisition from the other parts of the stack. But if we look at business intelligence, we see that there's this interaction layer that decouples from the data layer as well, which is where the observability warehouse comes in.
Mm-hmm. I got you. Are we going to have a unified observability warehouse? Because if I look across all of IT, everybody seems to be collecting telemetry data. Is it different data, or is it all the same data and we just need to figure out how to share it better, like we were taught in kindergarten?
Well, I mean, that's fundamentally the same question that led to the evolution of the BI space. Is you had this business data. It came from various different business units. You want to do corporate level reporting. You want each business unit to look at what they're doing. You want each of the analysts to see stuff. And you're wondering, like, how do we share this? How do we have the data? How do we make sure that it's in alignment with what we want it to look like, and then share it so that the organization can generally kind of get value from it? And the answer there was the SQL database. And by putting everything in SQL, by abstracting everything by a query language, it became possible to have the data in one place and let each individual group kind of interact with it using whatever tool they prefer. That same evolution is what will come to the observability world. And so will there only be one place to store the data? I mean, that's not how markets work. If there's only one place, that's a monopoly, and now there will always be new people that come in. But people will be looking more and more for, I've got my data here. Don't make me move it. Just let me query it. I want to use this tool. Great. Use that tool. Query it. You want to use that tool? Great. Use that tool. Query it. Use what you want to use on top of it. There's no reason that just because the data is in one place, it can't be used by multiple tools. The kind of separation there is really the query language. And that's the fundamental difference between the observability and security world and the business intelligence world, where business intelligence is kind of, they have a heavy adoption into SQL, where the observability and security world has a number of different query languages that people have adopted over time.
Will AI kind of flatten that out a little bit? Because the AI agent theoretically will be able to speak multiple programming languages, and they'll be able to query data where it happens to be found and pull it back into something that looks like, I don't know, a unified dashboard, possible?
Yes, but no, but yes. I don't know. Like it's like I agree with the hope and the vision that AI can just take away all of this knowledge of language. And it's just like, I asked AI a question, it gives me the answer. So far, at least when I've been interacting with AI, I liken it. So I'm not a sculptor. I don't know anything about sculpting, but I can make up metaphors about it. And I liken it to if I want to like chip wood, or I want to do a wood sculpture and I have a block of wood. It's really nice and easy to use a machine to like make the general shape. But when you want that to look like a real sculpture, you've got to get in there yourself and like do this stuff. And I found AI to be the same way. yes, you can use AI for kind of broad strokes things. You can use it to start a first draft of a letter. You can use it to even write some code initially. But when you actually look at what it did, you're going to find all sorts of things that need to be adjusted and changed and things that are updated. And sure, AI over time will get better, but I'm not sure it's going to like completely displace the need to understand what it's actually doing, to look at it, to evaluate it, to supervise it. And so I don't know how much it's truly going to eliminate the need for an understanding of the language versus just reduce the population that needs to have a strong understanding of it, if that makes sense.
It does indeed. I think people are struggling with storage of telemetry data, at least
Yes.
some that I talk to. And, theoretically, at least maybe we've got too much of a good thing now. So how do I figure out what data to store when I need it to observe it? Because, I'll talk to some folks who are like data hoarders and they just store everything.
Yep.
Then I got other folks who are barely storing anything. And then, of course, when something bad happens, they don't have the right data.
Exactly. And that's the I think that's been like you touch on a really key point. People in this space have been faced with well, I've got a bunch of data. The unit cost to store the data is higher than I wish it was. So now what do I do with it? Do I throw some of it away so that the economics work out? Or do I find a different place to put it with better unit economics, but maybe a worse interaction pattern, or it's slower to access, or I have to take extra steps in order to make it so that I can actually use it? And these two options have kind of traditionally been given to people. More and more we see people, there is some amount of pruning and throwing away data, but as you mentioned, now when you need it, you don't have it. And especially when you're doing like a security incident investigation or something like that, that can be key to not knowing what actually happened. So people tend to be leaning towards, well, with the introduction of public cloud, you've got your object stores. It's pretty cheap storage. It's relatively easy to get access to. So people end up funneling it off into the object stores. But then they have the challenge of, how do I make it actually interactable? I have people who use one tool, but now they have to learn yet another tool in order to interact with this data. Or do I take that data and I transfer it back into this tool when we actually need it, or what's going on? And talking a little bit about our product, Imply's product itself, what we've built is we've said, as people are leaning into this cloud storage, what they care about is that unit cost. They want the best compression, but they don't want to give up the ability to actually query it and interact with it from the tool that they have. And we've found that when you take compression and you make it kind of domain specific, so for us, that's logs. When you compress specifically for logs, you can do a really good job in order to reduce the overall byte count, which fundamentally then turns into a lower unit cost. And you can also use the latest and greatest indexing techniques to make that compressed form still queryable. And that's kind of the product that we have. And that's kind of what we like to call this observability warehouse, where once you can take those logs, put them in a queryable and compressed format, you can minimize the unit cost, and then you build the connections. You work with all the query languages of the different tools that people are using. And now you can store the data once and interact with it from multiple different tools.
Mm-hmm. Will we ever get to the point where I just come in the morning and there's, a memo from some AI tool somewhere that just says, here's the 3 things we found in the observability warehouse that are likely to get you fired, and here's our recommendations for doing something about it?
Yes. Now, are those 3 things actually legitimate? I think that's the fundamental question. I think we're already at the point where you can get a list of 3 things that AI says you should look at. The question is the signal to noise ratio, and I'm sure there's different things there, but in general, like I talking about AI and my own personal framing of how AI is going to impact the data world in general is I like to think that history always repeats itself. And so like this whole business intelligence to observability warehouse thing, that's just a repetition of history. Talking about AI, I like to think of it in terms of manufacturing automation. And so way back in the day, there was the assembly line with people standing on the assembly line doing things, putting stuff together. I wasn't there at the time, so I don't. I'm perhaps making stuff up, but there were people on an assembly line doing stuff. Then we started coming out with robots to kind of automate the assembly line. And I'm sure when that was coming out, it's like, oh man, humans are not going to have jobs anymore. There's nothing that we're going to be able to do. We can't do anything. All of this. But what has actually happened is the assembly line still exists. It's more automated. There's more robots on it. There are supervisors and humans who watch it. There's people who design it and lay it out. There's people who manage it. But that assembly line still exists. And I liken the assembly line to the data platform. No matter what robots you've got, no matter what AI you have, it has to interact with some data. So you need some system that has the data. But the other thing that automating the manufacturing has done is by increasing the throughput of one assembly line, it's actually had a ton of knock-on effects on the supply chain. Because now you need more materials to get to one location in order to actually populate that assembly line, generate the production, and push everything out. And to me, I see that the metaphor over there of AI and AI consuming data is going to be querying the data platforms. It's going to be interacting with the data in the data platforms, but that's going to have a knock-on effect of being able to consume, aggregate, manage, and deal with so much more data that there's going to be a lot less hurdles to people being like, oh yeah, but I can't do anything with that data anyway. Nothing can look at it. Nobody has time to look at it. And so it's going to actually increase the pressure and increase the demand for more data coming in, which is going to require the data platforms to really scale out and truly optimize on that unit cost and make it available to the AI agents to tell you the three things you need to look at, that then you look at and maybe they're right, maybe they're not. But yeah.
Do you think it will get easier to instrument these applications and all these data sources? Because I think we solved the problem of the cost, but I'm not quite clear that the OpenTelemetry agents that are out there are easy to install and maintain just yet. So what do we need to do there?
So my first answer is that my focus is entirely on the data platform, and the actual agentry to get it in, I'm unopinionated about it. I'll take data from anywhere. I don't care. I just want to store it as in the best way possible. On the flip side, I think like actually instrumenting things, connecting it, working with agents. I don't know. I see it as a bit of a last mile problem. It's always going to exist. People are always developers are always going to do new things. There's always going to be some hot new framework out there that like won't have a thing integrated with it. When you actually get to the content of the data, which is another part, there's like, can I get the data from point A to point B? But then can I actually understand what the content of it is so that I can make use of it on the other side? And like, especially when it comes to logs, the content of a log line was something a developer just thought, they're just like, oh, I'll type this because that means something to me. Does it mean anything to anybody else? Who knows? But it's all extremely schemaless. There's like not any specific schema. There's usually commonalities between it, but it's all varied and different. And I don't know that, like, there's kind of two approaches you can take with this sort of thing. You can try to ratchet things down and provide people strict definitions that they're supposed to fit inside of and expect everyone to do that. The humans don't do that. I don't know. At least I've not found it easy to get humans to do that. I think humans are much more likely to just kind of go off and do a thing. And then you're left figuring out, okay, you did a thing. It actually has nice outcomes, but it's not aligned with these other things. So now how do I figure out how to align them and smash them together? And I think that's actually the most important thing for the tooling and the platforms in this space to focus on is don't try and change people. try and make it so that when they go and do things, you can still fit it together and get value.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to get your opinion on this, but as far as I can tell, there's going to be a bunch of AI agents that are trained for different tasks that are going to be tapping into this observability warehouse for data to figure out what they're going to recommend. But at the end of the day, won't they just argue with each other like humans do?
I mean, yes, but their arguments are going to be extremely positive. They're always going to start with, "You are so smart. That was the greatest idea I've ever heard. Let me go do. Let me go." Yeah, no, I don't know. Like, I don't know if you've experienced this, but every time I put something into AI, it tells me I'm the smartest person in the world. I'm like, wow. It took me a while to get over it. At first, I started thinking, "Oh, I am smart," but then I was like, "No, yeah." Anyway.
Who knew they could program sycophants, right?
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I mean, yes. And you can think of us humans as the ultimate AIs, and in which case, I mean, are we gonna produce? Is an AI gonna be able to exceed what we are? I don't know. We'll see. I think it'll be different, but fundamentally, history always repeats itself.
All right, folks, I think you heard it here. We're going to have better observability for sure, and that's a good thing. Exactly who's going to be observing what, we don't know yet. Eric, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
All right, and back to you guys in the studio.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to our Predict 2026 sessions. Or if this is the first session you're watching, it is early in the morning. Welcome to Predict 2026. I'm Alan Schimmel, founder of Techstrong, and I'm really happy to have in this session my friend and longtime business partner, Mitch Ashley. Mitch, for those of you who may not be familiar, Mitch is VP and practice lead for the software lifecycle engineering practice area of Futurum Research. If you're not familiar with Mitch, he has a long history in leading software development teams and platforms and IT in general, security as well. Mitch, thanks for joining us on this year's Predict. This isn't your first Predict, by the way. You've been doing it for years with us here at Techstrong. It was certainly quite a year in 2025, but as we look at 2026, the best may be yet to come.
Yeah, I certainly think, 2025 was amazing, just the pace of innovation, and maybe took all of us, took a breath away a little bit at how fast things were changing. I think we're going to see that times 10 in 2026. It's the pace of innovation is going to continue to accelerate, but it's accelerating in a way that it's kind of moving up the ladder of what we're delivering, because so much of 2025 was about, let me give you this tool or this point solution, or we're addressing this problem with an open source standard. And now we're building more platforms, and we're going to get into that with some of the predictions here. But I think it's more about how we more holistically create software leveraging AI. And not to say every project moves over to AI, does everything for you. That's certainly not going to happen. We're going to live in a hybrid world, but we'll get into that. So,
absolutely. And I want to make clear that, Mitch, your session is kind of a bellwether of all the sessions that we have here. But who should be watching this right now, right? If you are a developer, a DevOps person, a platform engineer, an SRE, a security person, but beyond that even, if you are an executive at a vendor who provides tools, and God knows there's enough tools and vendors who provide them in this space. Really, this is really aimed at you. This is the kind of real world, common sense advice that we're giving you, Mitch is giving you based on these projections. So Mitch, let's dive in. The first big prediction you have up here is that we're going to see the emergence of a new AI stack as the foundation for development.
You can already see elements of this happening. I refer to this as AI-centered development because there's so many terms: AI native, AI augmented, et cetera. But we're seeing the pieces of it being put in place of what underpins both software engineering and also the applications. And I say software engineering because developers are very much central to this happening, in addition to what we do with no code, low code, vibe coding kinds of activities across this. But I think the important part of this is that as this stack develops, it's happening not just at the kind of developer layer, development tool layer, but it's also happening for automation of tasks, of work. And we'll get into some of the embedding and continuous aspects of what happens on the platform. I think this is a year where we're going to see the functional equivalent of whatever Kubernetes is for AI. And I'm not saying Kubernetes goes away, but whatever the next abstraction that manages and controls Kubernetes, refer to it as agent control planes, escalation, orchestration, some of the scalability components that combine. We have open source projects that are already about helping people put AI models and agents into Kubernetes clusters. But that abstraction layer of our infrastructure software that we build software on is really what the vendors are racing to put in place, in addition to how developers get access to those tools. So I think that's a big part of where we'll be at the end of this year, is being able to quantify what that stack looks like. Not that it's finished, not that it's done, but this is the new AI stack.
Fair enough. You know, Mitch, I just was starting to get my head around Kubernetes, and the whole cloud native stack is the new compute, the new stack. It's amazing that here we are talking about what's next. And it's funny because I remember, I don't know if it probably wasn't last year's Predict, but it might have been the Predict before then. So 2024 or 2023. And I remember asking our experts and analysts, what do you see on the horizon that displaces Kubernetes? And none of us could see anything on the horizon that displaced Kubernetes. And like you said, I'm not saying Kubernetes is going away either, but we need sort of, I think, what was the word you used? The Kubernetes for AI?
Mm-hmm. The Kubernetes equivalent. The functional equivalent of Kubernetes. What is going to be that helps us scale and operate as well as develop agent-based technologies? We talk about orchestration. We talk about permissions, memory management, lifecycle of agents, policy, governance, and controls, all kinds of things like that. Now we have piece parts of that. We have vendors, AWS, Microsoft, GitHub, others who are coming out with these early kind of control planes. They call them different things, but that's not the full solution either. But you see the collapsing of the development environment and the sandbox environment, at least today, of where you operate these things in. And we're starting to put the tooling and the underlying fabric underneath that in place. And I think we'll be able to quantify that much better at the end of this year, because that's what we have to get AI agent applications into production at scale. So guess what the vendors are working on? Very much this space.
I agree. Agreed. And there's a tendency, especially in tech, out with the old, in with the new. I don't think it necessarily means the death of a lot of the tools and a lot of the processes and kind of patterns that we've developed, but they are going to have to kind of get with the program. What do you think?
It's a long time ago. I've been doing this for a while, as you can tell, but a long time ago, I realized, no technology ever really goes away, right? It's still around somewhere. It's COBOL code or assembler code I wrote way back coming out of school. It's probably still in production. And these tools will still be around. They'll very much be there. But what happens is the next technology either abstracts or kind of takes it to the next level of automation. Maybe it's AI brought into it. And that's where we get into AI is not a feature. AI is a core part of how that operational element works, whether it's CI/CD and whatever the next form of that looks like, or maybe it's very much the form that is in today, just heavily augmented with AI. We're going to need to think about how we develop not only AI agent-based software, but we're still going to do traditional development as well. So it's not going away. It'll be with us for a long time too.
Mitch, all excellent points, and I think our audience out there can take heart in this. If you don't mind, I'd like to move on to the next prediction that you had talked about, and this is rewiring of development job DNA, right? Rewiring what it means to be a developer, what a developer does. Tell us kind of your vision here, Mitch.
Well, I think the over exuberance around AI in 2025 led to a lot of predictions of the death of the developer, not literally, but the developer job. And we're sure creating a lot of tools for developers for those jobs are going away. No, very much developers are going to be around for a long time because these are the folks who, just like they architect and build software today, they're doing that in the next generation on this AI stack. So the developer role, though, is going to be rewired in terms of working with this AI stack and new paradigms, new patterns, new models about how we create software. So that's why I call it a rewiring of the DNA. It's our DNA. We're just using it in a different way. To me, the developer are going to be expected to be more kind of stronger reasoning, domain understanding experts, contextual judgment. They are the architects and the orchestrators of how software gets built. Maybe they're still editing some code. Maybe they're not doing much of that, but they're more orchestrating with agents, or they're designing agents to perform tasks. All these agents are going to get built by all the vendors for us. Developers are going to be building agents just like they've built Python scripts for doing CI/CD, even though we have a CI/CD, server that does the load work for us. So it's really the responsibility of the developer to pull all of this together in a systemic way of how software gets built, whether it's partially heavily leveraged on AI, whether it's communicating with traditional teams, and the requirements for that. You see a lot of requirements-led or intent-led kind of development. That's, I think, a phase of what we're going through where we're stepping back and saying, hey, just a rolling conversation of prompts to AI to write code for us has a lot of issues. That's not the best way to write code. We kind of end up backed into corners because of that. Let's be more prescriptive and descriptive about what we want to create. And a lot of times that's the hardest part. You don't know what you want up front. You know a half of what you want. And the discovery process is actually part of building software as well. That's why we did things like Agile and Scrums and those kinds of activities, because it's an iterative process. And that's very much what the developer role shifts to. But I think we add other elements to it as well. Things like in the development process, starting to leverage, and I'll talk about this in another prediction, leverage security and observability, governance, agent behavior during and throughout the development process into production, rather than those being linear steps that we perform later.
Fair. Mitch, there's the birds and the bees question here, I call it, though, which is, where do developers come from, Daddy? And if a lot of these tools, new processes, a lot of this AI is kind of taking the place of our juniors and our, newbies and our freshers, if you will. Where does the next batch of developers come from to do what the jobs and the roles that you've laid out?
Well, entry-level folks take heart. Those jobs aren't all going away. It may be difficult right now because of the overexuberance of 2025 and, frankly, over-rotation on telling people we won't need developers or we won't need junior people. Right now, more senior developers are drastically needed to help define how we're creating software with AI, because you have to think about the entire system, not just writing code and functionality. But with that become the trades of, I need somebody to build these agents for me. I don't have time to build all those agents. I need someone to work with me to help me do that. I need someone to monitor the guardrails and see that they're being applied properly for security or observability. I need someone to work with me on the next architecture and prototyping some ways we might build this software, or how we work with our community of users. So my recommendation, this is actually came down of a Techstrong gang session that we had. Kimberly Bates had a great example use case with someone coming out of school, didn't know what to do with their skills in liberal arts. and using AI to put together a learning program for you. So maybe you didn't learn how to do agent development or to do AI orchestrated development. Use AI to help you build those skills. So you're walking into an interview with that, some of that knowledge and some of that capability. But guess what? Those environments haven't figured it out all either. They're looking for people to come help them. And they need generational expertise, both people with experience and people who are encumbered by too much experience at times and can think about new ways of doing things as well.
I agree with you. I mean, look, this might be the greatest learning tool ever, right? And training tool. I remember my initial reactions to the World Wide Web. The world at your fingertips didn't even begin to capture it. But this is so much more, right? And that, Mitch, that brings up something that I've seen is that a lot of people, especially non-tech people, they're using AI as sort of, let's call it enhanced Google, right? An enhanced Google search, but they're still searching. Instead of recognizing it as the teacher, as a provider of, what it can, it's game-changing. Game-changing. I think you're dead on, and kudos to Kimberly. She brought it up. I think it was a graphic arts person.
I believe it was.
Who was working on that, and more power to you. But look, this is going to have impact at the development throughout the software lifecycle development.
Mm-hmm.
The software development lifecycle. Excuse me. At every stage, we're gonna see that in. Mitch, if it's okay, I'd like to move on to the next prediction you have here, which was no vendor lock-in. It's like a cardinal rule. Yeah, it's imperative.
It is. It's a big theme in 2025, and I think it's mandatory in 2026. We're not going through AI innovation where one vendor has really come out with a leapfrog beyond everybody else. We're not in the VMware era where suddenly VMware is dominant and really becomes the thing that everybody uses. Now, even VMware has adopted open standards around how it works as well. You could say the same thing for Docker and the open standards for containers. Everybody realizes that not one vendor has the answer because this is a complex problem of how we really build these platforms and underlying capabilities that we use AI with. And so these proprietary silos is what enterprises are worried about getting locked into. If I sign up just for, say, Salesforce or Microsoft or AWS or Google or one company's vision of how this is articulated, I run the risk of, the next innovation I'm not going to be able to take advantage of because I'm now architected into a proprietary way of doing things, of an agent control plane. So the message to the market, and it's being sent very loud and clear from enterprise customers, but all customers really is, we are looking for, just like we went through this evolution with cloud native and microservices and containers, we're looking for open source. We're looking for open standards. We're looking for collaboration and interoperability across vendors. Because guess what? No enterprise is a sole one vendor company. They run everything because they acquire companies that use different platforms and technologies. And it is a multi-cloud, multi-vendor world. And that's just a fact of life. And frankly, vendors that kind of paint themselves into the proprietary, capture the customer, walled garden kinds of approaches, I think are going to struggle with wider, broad scope adoption of their technology. People are very much emphasizing open. It's kind of funny. We were talking about the death of open source a year or two ago. What's going to happen with open source? Is it still going to be around? I think it's as vibrant and prevalent today as it ever has been.
There's another aspect of this too, Mitch, and I remember now, it's what I wanted to bring up earlier, which is, SaaS has become the dominant delivery or shape of delivering developer tools.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. You don't know this, but in my session with Daniel Newman, Daniel thinks that maybe 2/3 of SaaS companies are going to disappear as a result of AI. Satya Nadella, who I think some people think may be smarter than Daniel, um,
I
says,
can't comment on that. He's my
yeah,
boss.
all
Okay.
right. But Satya also calls for the death of SaaS as we know it, right? As a result of AI. Um, how does that play into then tool selection, tool lock-in? And it's also a segue to our next section, Mitch, which is vendor competition.
hmm Yeah, I'm always cautious about, I don't do predictions about death of things because they rarely truly die, right? Um, SaaS applications was the death of commercial shrink wrap software. Well, no, we still buy licenses to software. Even SaaS applications, most of them have a, premises edition for running because they need to. It's just a requirement of the market. I think more holistically thinking about how software changes, because part of where I think that prediction comes from is I remember having the awakening as I worked with more and more AI development tools is like, you know what? I feel like I could probably build just about anything that I want now that I've got these tools, right? I don't have to be developing software to do it every day. Maybe end users feel that kind of exuberance as well too. Is that realistic? Probably not. It definitely isn't. Not in my case. But whether we're ending SaaS is a delivery vehicle for low friction delivery for getting products and tools and applications into people's hands. I think we're going to be doing that for a long time. It's the AWS credit card and a browser, and now you're in the cloud. It's the same thing of I want to try that development tool. I don't need to install it, download it, and manage it. It's going to be maybe it becomes more of a delivery vehicle, and then whether you take that and build it into your application or you use it as a SaaS service or a combination of both is where that heads. The next prediction that I have is really the competition for developer mindshare is really hitting this kind of red line. You think of a tachometer, right? We're getting into that red line zone because vendors at feverish pitch are going after the developer communities, including vendors that kind of lost their passion about serving developers. Excuse me, are swinging back and saying, hey, we have to have an IDE too. I mean, you have companies that, IBM and AWS suddenly having IDEs, Google. Why? Because that today is the entry point or the portal, if you will, for development work that's happening. Why are they going after developers? Because that's where this next architecture and generation of software is being created, both how we create software as well as the apps and the agents, et cetera. And they want to capture mind share, not proprietary lock-in. Sure, they'd love that, but they know that's not what developers are going to sign up for. But if they're developing on their platform, at least one of the platforms that they're using, they're going to be using their services, their tool set, and part of what comes with it, their cloud in some cases. So I think we're going to continue to see massive emphasis on the developer community, which I said in the very beginning of this kind of AI wave with generative AI is developers at the tip of the spear for adoption of generative AI. And that's because they are the folks creating the software that uses it in their work. And it's just built into developer DNA, experimentation, trying new things, finding ways of doing things better. They're just kind of wired that way as having a big element of discovery and exploration in their psyche.
Mitch, next up was the IDE shift from coding tools to AI development control surfaces. Loaded.
Yeah, if you think about IDEs, one of the things that they've been so beneficial is that they're very pluggable. They're expandable, depending on the IDE that you use. Even going back to Eclipse, in Visual Code is the most Studio, is the most widely used IDE, but there are many others as well. The reason why vendors have leapt onto this is because that's a delivery vehicle for getting their capabilities in front of customers and developers. But they also know we have to support other people's models than the ones that we provide as a company, other people's tools in addition to the ones that we provide. But what's happening today is developers work in this bimodal surface where the IDE is part code and part one or more interactions, natural language interfaces to the models and the agents that they're working with and they're building. And at some point, that starts to gradually shift to be more of what the interface looks like, and less so worrying about and modifying and inspecting code. We do have agents that are starting to inspect code for us and do code reviews. But as we add more things like agent control planes and security guardrails, things like that, we need to orchestrate that work. When I talked about the role of the developer shifting to being that systemic view of how work happens to create software, this is the environment where that happens. Whether that's the IDE tool of today and it evolves into that, sometimes you need a new generation of technology to kind of take that next step and not carry everything with it that the current IDEs do. So I don't know that we're certainly not going away from IDEs, but I think the role of how they function and how they work become less of a Swiss Army knife and more of a focused on systemic orchestration of how we develop software.
Agreed. IDEs have certainly seen a lot of change over the years. Want to move next, DevOps and platform engineering, two near and dear topics for me. Refactored for hybrid AI-centered and traditional development.
There's a mouthful. Yes.
Yes, there is.
So we are today, and we will continue to be living in this kind of bimodal or hybrid world of we have traditional software development workflows and tool chains and paths, and maybe they're being augmented by AI. Maybe they're not being heavily touched by AI. There's some things we're not going to aggressively go after changing, but at the same time, we're introducing new ways of doing development, developing agents, new tools, platforms, control services, things like that. So I don't see platform engineering being the wall of tools in the garage that you go out and say, which tool would you like, developer, today? Yeah, that developer portal is part of it. But I think they're key. They're the force multiplier of how do you take the innovations that development, test, security, operations, platform, SRE, any of those roles are finding from AI and make those accessible, durable to the rest of the organization, because they can be built into the platform or expanded their accessibility to other people. So I think the role shifts more from here's our standard environments to, yes, we're doing that, but we're also part of the innovation cycle of moving us towards new ways of developing and figuring out the challenges that we have of sort of the impedance mismatch where rapid agent or AI-based, AI-centered development software operates at this pace with these techniques, and traditional software operates this way. Where do those cross when they need to cross? And we're doing a coordinated release across applications or software. So that's part of the reality I think we'll be in for a long time. The folks that I recognize that, the vendors that identify that, not jumping all the way onto the AI bandwagon, but to your point, we're going to have these tools around for a long time. We'll be able to work in this hybrid world and help customers adopt both while they're still doing the jobs they have today.
Excellent. I think this might be the last one. Shift left gives way to continuous guardrails.
We have struggled with shift left, haven't we, Alan? We've talked about shift left.
Well, it's ascended, it's descended, the hype, the trowel, out the other side. I'm not quite sure anymore myself.
What is shift left exactly? I think the underlying principle was do things earlier so that you kind of prevent security issues or quality issues or whatever it might be. And the challenge is that our current mode of operating is we think linearly about how software is created. We think developers build stuff. We then send it through a process where it gets scanned, and after it's been checked into, the repository, it may also go through, of course, the CI process and then scanned again, et cetera, for security vulnerabilities in one case. And because we can apply AI to those tools, whether it's security, observability, governance, agent behavior, things like that, we can now build that into the process of while we're developing it. Some of those security vulnerabilities can be taken care of at the point of time that AI is generating the code for us and maybe presenting as code that's already had a vulnerability taken out of it at that point. That would be the most desirable effect if we don't get code that has at least some of the vulnerabilities that we experience today. So the guardrails, the important part of this is continuous. And that's where we really achieve a huge level of productivity and improvement in security and quality and governance. And I mentioned behavior because of agent behavior, right? It's not deterministic, so we have to have some way of knowing what it's doing and keeping it on track of where we want it to do, how we want it to do things and not do things. So that's this continuous movement. Now, you see this in the market already, announcements like when AWS came out with Agent HQ, and part of the announcement was with an agent for doing DevOps, and you have observability vendors that are part of the announcement. People that are part of the larger software development lifecycle recognize we don't want to be left out of this either. We're going to have an AI strategy, or we're heading down our path of it. But part of it is to get into the front end of where this is happening, into the control plane, into the IDE. So it's part of when developers build agents to construct code for them or use the LLMs to do that, they access those tools, MCP, right to your code scanning tool. Or that's an agent that reviews code for security or other kinds of issues. We do prompts today for meeting corporate coding standards, development standards, things like that. So that's being built in, and that will make it much more of a continuous process. So I think the more we stay in a linear, stepwise fashion, that'll make it more difficult for vendors who kind of have that mantra and are sticking with it to get into the AI model of how we develop software. We still need point-in-time scanning, point-in-time, implementation of some of these technologies. We need observability in operations and production. Of course we do. But it's moving upstream, not kind of one by one, but it's actually jumping into the front end of the development model and following through in the rest of the development path. So I'm very optimistic about, what we would call shift left. And I think it's now the model is continuous. It's happening all the time because it's not just automated, but it's built into the process and the platforms.
Well, Mitch, this has certainly been a revelation in terms of these predictions. If I had to sum it up, I guess we'd say you don't see much happening in 2026.
I don't know what I'm going to be talking about this year. I'll have to figure something else out. Maybe, I'll take up knitting or something. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
this is the best time to be in our industry. I love what we're doing.
I agree with you, man. It's a great time to be alive. Mitch, thanks for joining us in Predict 2026. We hope you've enjoyed this session. Go check out the rest of our analyst predictions and sessions, including the RSAC analyst talking about cybersecurity and what to expect at RSAC this year. This is Alan Schimmel. Enjoy Predict 2026, everyone.
The bleeding edge of AI is agentic AI, and agentic AI that can learn new skills, grab new skills off the internet, maybe install malware off the internet as a new skill. Join me on the Tech Field Day podcast as we find out why that might not be a good thing. Welcome to the Tech Field Day podcast, where we bring together a group of IT technical experts to discuss a single idea about some key concept in the industry. This podcast features a variety of perspectives from members of the Tech Field Day delegate community and is often recorded in association with one of our events. Tech Field Day is a part of the Futurum Group, and this podcast is also published on our sister company site, Techstrong TV. On this episode, maybe you shouldn't hand your AI agents the keys to your whole business or your whole life. But before we get into the discussion, let's meet who's on the panel today.
What's going on, everyone? Super excited to be here. Gerard Cavalinas. I'm the founder of Tech House 570. I am also a network and security engineer for Aqueduct Technologies. You could find me at gcavalinas on Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, and wherever books are sold.
Welcome, everybody. Also, happy to be here. Name is Anudra Oliver, cybersecurity executive, former deputy CISO Allianz Life. You can find me also on LinkedIn, my primary pages, as well as other chat forums across the IT and I security spaces.
And I'm Alistair Cook. I'm an event lead here at Tech Field Day and also one of the co-hosts of the Tech Field Day Rundown. And one of the topics we covered recently on the Rundown was Maltbot or Claudebot or Clawbot or whatever the heck it's called now, which was an awesome AI assistant that could autonomously go out and learn new skills and be helpful in all parts of your life. Only it became very unhelpful when those skills actually were spyware of various sorts. Various types of malware ended up on the repository of skills, and very quickly people decided that maybe they didn't want random software taking control of their entire life. And for me, this sits in a wider context around governance of the pace, governance of AI and agentic AI as we try and match the pace of possible innovation by applying the things that are being built for agentic AI. And how the heck do we make sure that these new technologies don't end up being a real business risk, business danger for us? The Maltbot one particularly showed personal risk, but it could absolutely have translated into a very large business risk if you've been using these interesting skills that Maltbot would acquire in your own business. This really does seem like a sort of big red flag around how we're approaching using agentic AI and possibly a lot of immaturity in our use.
I'm gonna just jump right in. Don't get me wrong, and I've been just sitting on this for a while, so I'm super again excited to be here to talk about it. There's two parts to this. Number one, I think Claudebot, Moltbot, whatever you want to call it, whatever name or new adaptation it will be in the next few weeks, months, or years. I think it's a great tool. I think, like everything else, AI needs to have it's such a powerful tool, and it can either be leveraged in the appropriate way or not if it gets into the wrong hands. The solution itself, I think, is really cool, right? And it sounds, when you say very broadly, like, hey, you could install this app or install this program, and it starts ingesting all of your data, emails, texts, whatever the case may be, and it will start helping you in life and make your life easy, the things you're doing, scheduling things, whatever the case may be. That's super cool, but you need to have security perimeters in place. You need to have governance, and you, above all else, need to really understand. It needs to be fully vetted and I feel tested, because that's just it. Anytime you have any type of baseline code or any type of just a basic text file configuration, there's no perimeters, there's no security, and as an IT professional, as a security professional doing this for many years and still doing it, it is terrifying because it's super cool, but it's not leveraged and it's not vetted properly. And because of that, you're deliberately exposing risk, whether you think you are or not. It goes back to the old, don't click on that email. You can kind of tell what the difference is between a phishing email. And that's why we have third party companies that run phishing campaigns and do these types of things, because some love them, but some end users just they make those mistakes. That's going to happen. But something like this is very scary. This is like next level Avengers level threat, where it's not just clicking on an email anymore. You're putting your machine or your server or your application or your whatever. You're saying, hey, run this, which I don't know why you'd run something without really fully understanding or vetting it. Same thing with, hey, this is this command. Let's pop it into the command line and run it. That's a no-no. Why would you do that? So again, the solution itself, phenomenal. I think vetted and framed and contained properly could be of use. Just going, freestyle and Wild West in it, and just, hey, clicking on this and letting it go and letting it talk to all your stuff and then putting it out there publicly, globally. No, it's terrifying. It's just we got to do it better. That's my 2 cents to start. It's just got to be done better.
Yeah, and I think there's a conversation that I often have, not only with organizations, but individuals on the topic of agency. And I think as you begin to look not only at your environment that you work within, there's spaces in which you operate within. That could be either on-prem, on your location, or even at home. Hey, there's places in your house that you don't want your kids in because maybe have things that maybe shouldn't be appropriate. You need to take the same approach with the information that you're storing and you're using to connect to places like this beautiful internet that we have. And so I think there's this nice parallel of making life simplistic, making it more manageable, and then actually introducing new risk that probably doesn't need to be there. I think there's this, and we talk about the FOMO side of things with AI, and I think there definitely is an element of wanting to be part of the crowd and not wanting to be the last one, to hop on the ship. That being said, I think there's also an element of risk that also comes into the equation. We've had this thing with open source, and somewhere between the first iteration of the Mac and now open source has all of a sudden become the best thing ever. And I think there's a lot of great things that come from open source. But what I'm finding is that we're not doing our due diligence. And in that absence of that governance, in the absence of just that moment to ask yourself, what exactly am I giving this thing agency to? We're having critical mistakes that cost us, so much time that I think it just allows us, we need a minute just to kind of reset and understand what are we actually trying to solve with some of the conversations.
And just to piggyback off that real quick, because you made a great point, Andre, like from what I even read about this not too long ago, there's like 30,000 instances that were just like, hey, we're just blowing open the doors and here's all of your data. And here now, from what I also understand, there was two ways to approach this. Like the LLMs would find open source based projects or just a ton of different, metaphorically speaking, wormholes to start pulling this data in. Now, it's one thing if we're, Joe Schmo and hey, you have, basic emails like your kids' photos, like personal stuff, that's one thing. But what about like high level executive CISOs, people who are like, hey, go ahead and start talking all my stuff. What if there's PDFs, blueprints, NDA classified documents? Like that's when it starts getting even more terrifying. And it goes back to it doesn't matter where you're at, if you're, just a dad, multiple kids, or you're, a senior vice president running a high level operation or a small, medium, very large enterprise business. You're just telling it to talk to your stuff, pull in that data. There's a ton of what's the word I'm looking for? There's just a ton of open holes and points and vulnerability areas of weakness to just penetrate and take this data. So again, it's we got to be better, right? Like there's got to be some type of governance or some type of high level group of technical analysts, specialists who can really leverage. Like, and I think that should be for all AI. I think instead of just having the tool, right? Like it started with Chat GPT and we're having fun, we're making images, but now it's evolved and it's growing into something so much more. So we need to have a better way to control it. That's got to happen.
And I think this is not new. Let's be very clear. When Docker containers were new, you'd pull something from Docker Hub with no idea what was within it. And the resolution wasn't that the end customer went and validated every single container that they actually pulled. It was that governance was built into the container repositories. And so there'd be a knowledge of who was releasing this content. Is this trustworthy content or is this less trustworthy? And there's a continuum in trust and there's also a continuum in business risk. And it's that crossover point in finding where your business fits for this use case and this level of risk. But there was no governance at all in the skills that Maltbot could acquire. And worse than that, it was just a description of how to acquire is what was being stored. And so it was, a lot of them, it was just go and pull this script from this website and pipe it into your script interpreter and just randomly install software. And although you could tell Maltbot, don't do that for me, let me go and do the governance for it and check on those things. That's not what customers ended up doing. And in the same way that as they're using things like coding assistants, some of these coding assistants, there's literally a switch of YOLO. I'm prepared to take all of the risks there are in order for you to take all the work off me. That kind of, both the education of people to not take all of those risks on, particularly inside a business context, but also the need for the governance to actually take away the possibility those risks occur. And a path I can see for the chap who developed the Claude bot, Maltbot, whatever we're calling it is towards actually offering a managed service of a governed set of skills that are absolutely certain to not documented. This is the information it will want to access. This is the components that are being deployed out. This is the risk that you are taking when you're using it. Having that explicit governance, I can absolutely then see the stage where this is a product that are used in enterprise organizations where you wrap a lot of governance around it. Because, as you say, Gerard, when it's just me at home with my personal emails, there's a risk. There's a risk to me around particularly identity theft. But when it's the sort of core of my large enterprise business, particularly if I'm an executive, then there's a much greater risk of damage with these things, and so there's more value in that governance.
There's one thing I wanted to add to, again, just learning about this, and I don't remember. So with the Claude bot or Maltbot, with the installer, and there was a GitHub repository. There was, and I wish I remember the exact file name. Normally I do in these instances, so I apologize, but it was like GitHub dot whatever was built into it to how do I put it was almost not like full governance, but when you do run the installer and or if you do pull this directly from GitHub, it would block specific file types and paths using like hash values. So it wouldn't just pull all your stuff. And I don't know who or what, somebody removed it out of the repository. So that's why it gives you like just full open access to just get whatever you want. There was like almost in essence like a safeguard built into it. Um, and it's like somebody took it out. It's like, why? Like that's a whole other question for a whole other, but why? Because like maybe the actual executable or the installer, I'm not sure. But the GitHub had a safeguard there. So it's like, hey, this is automatically going to run when you start pulling from the repo. And it's gonna let you pull like pictures, this, that, the third, but it's not gonna touch, whatever. But somebody took it out and they're just like, no, it's just gotta let it have access to everything. Like, so I know while it's not full blown governance, but it was some type of like preventer in place, and somebody just said, "Nah, we don't need it." I'm interested in, and I'm very curious as to why that was taken out.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when we think about this space that we're in right now, and I think also you brought it up before. I mean, when you were doing Docker containers, way back when we first started this, there was the barrier to entry was pretty high. You had to be somewhat technical. You had to know kind of how to operate within the space. And I think what we're seeing right now in AI is the bar is really low. They make it fairly easy for you to get in, to get going, to obviously to be really viable in the space very quickly. And I think that's intentional, right? Because we need adoption for AI for a multitude of different reasons. Ask any vendor, right? AI is sprinkled on it in some way, shape, or form. And so I think driving that adoption with the broader community allows the vendors to have a better place in society, which allows them to sell more product, which is a good thing. And there's a good impact with that. But I think at the same time, we have to remember that threat actors are also using the same avenues to further their ventures as well. And so I think the governance piece is big, but I think now if we're going to allow this level of access, allow this level of what I would say control into environments, as users generally speaking, we got to up the bar for understanding what security. And I know oftentimes we're called the team of no, right? But I think collectively, if this is the space that we're going to operate in, we at least have to be maybe the team of maybe I have a question versus just downloading. And I think that's that thing that's got to switch now with us as we begin to connect all these currently disconnected systems into our business processes and applications.
To finish up, just test, like it's pretty common anytime, like when Docker containers were first released, right? Like it's a pretty exciting way to transport apps, information, and data. But again, like everything else, the attackers 9 times out of 10 get a hold of it first, start ripping it apart, and they start figuring out how the hell can we exploit this and how can we take advantage? And then they've already got a few, steps ahead. I just feel like, not saying that our teams aren't currently doing this and the countries, but I just feel like maybe if we can just somehow, some way get a better track record of getting ahead of it, right? Like this tool is great, but let's really kind of spend a few days, spend a few weeks just ripping it apart, looking at it from both sides, looking how to actually, pen test it, looking to see if we could break it. Where are the vulnerability points? Where is this, that, before releasing it to the general public? But it's like you guys said, it's getting released, everybody's clicking it. And then they're just, hey, like it's the Wild West, and we're just doing all these things, and we're not really thinking long term of what those consequences could be.
I think there's a combined thing in there that you've both hit. One is ease of access to it. So being able to very quickly deploy just a sort of skeleton and say, go and do things for me. That's a desirable thing. That's something that is really positive in what we're seeing. I think that's just ease of access, and that a normal person, probably not my father-in-law at this stage, but somebody who is not an IT specialist is getting their hands on these things quickly because they're well publicized and they're easy to get into. And I think that's where it starts to fall down, right? Because if it was any one of the three of us deploying this thing, we'd be looking at it fairly closely. We'd be deploying it inside an isolated environment for our initial testing. We'd be giving it limited access to a very strictly controlled set of data. Even if we did then let it go wild with installing its own skills, we would be much slower to trust it with everything. But I think all of the hype that we've seen with ChatGPT and all of the generative AI tools, generating images, generating songs, we think as normal consumers think that AI is the solution to every problem, and that AI is very trustworthy. Yet we from the inside of the industry are quite the opposite of being concerned about it, about this whole idea of agentic AI taking autonomous action. This is one of the things that I saw at AI Infrastructure Field Day. Whenever people were talking about agents, they often were talking about guidance for a human who's going to take action rather than fully autonomous action. And we definitely had conversations about building trust before you'd ever want to have autonomous action. Yet, typical end user doesn't care about that. They want the action real fast.
Fire on all cylinders, and like it's just like beating the dead horse. It sucks because again it is so cool, and I understand, and that's the cool thing now. 2026 is AI and leveraging agentic AI and all these different solutions. It's baked into everything at every turn and corner you're going. But again, it goes back to the fundamentals, like working on the help desk. Like it doesn't matter how far I can go back in my career. Like don't click on this. Don't just you know what I mean. Having it in like you said, also having it in a controlled environment. How can you mess around with something if you don't understand it? That's all it is. And the human element of it, it's like we say it with love, but the layer 8 issue, right? Like, oh, we're just gonna click on it and oh, what's this? Let's just throw it on here. Let's throw it on our main data. Let's throw it on our, our DC. It's like, no, like no, but so is the cool kid, which is AI. So
Yeah, and I think, listen, a lot of this is driven by social media influencers, and I make the designation because they're not first and foremost thinking about the things that we're talking about right now, right? You can go and watch any video, any podcast on how to do the next cool thing, right? The reality is that human in the loop is not sexy, right? It's kind of it doesn't make for clicks, right? But if I can automate this process that kicks off 5 different things, starts my email and orders me an Uber, right? That's the next best thing. That is that wow factor that we're seeking. The question and the challenge is what's happening behind the wow factor. It's the uh-oh factor, right? And so when we find out those things and have to have those conversations or understanding, that I think we're having some of those challenges. And then it's, I go back and forth and it's, a common thing, common see with, even with your kids these days, right? The idea of the work to get the outcome, right? It's too much effort. I just want it to be there. I just want it to happen like it should, right? And that's kind of the space that we're operating in. And that's this kind of demon that we're dealing with. And so I think there's this nice common ground that we can gain as professionals to say, hey, there's a subset of things that I think make sense for us to automate. But as I'm talking with any person, any organization, my question is, well, and you've heard me before, what are we trying to solve for, right? And I think most oftentimes it's the absence of that outcome, the absence of that objective that allows us to have a minute to reassess and go through the process. But when you're just clicking and you're just adding for the purpose of doing it, there's no guardrails. There's very little incentive to think about the risk, the outcomes, the other things. And that I think is where the gotcha is for us in the space.
So I want to bring up a completely sort of different perspective on this, in that this is the first really big consumer, influencer-led story that has brought up AI security. Now, within the industry, we've talked about AI security, looking after your data, those kinds of things. But again, somebody walking down the street listening to the news may have heard some of this, may have heard the hype about Maltbot and then the terror at what the skills were doing. And I think this is leading us to a really good beginning conversation, to have those conversations that we know need to happen around how do you manage this? How do you do this securely? Who am I going to trust as I'm starting to use? Because foundationally, trust is underneath all of this. Who can I trust to do these automated things for me? I think it's really good that we've got this very public failure that is leading us to having that mature conversation that I think all of the providers who are doing enterprise work have already been having. Hopefully, this is driving other conversations. Are you all seeing other conversations that are outside of the industry, outside of the insiders talking to one another about security and AI?
I mean, right now it's always been, especially like within my organization, right? Like that's still a hot topic because it's always going to be it's the way of the future. Like we are finding ways to better, not only assist our clients and further bettering and heightening like the level of security and services we offer, implementing that across all their data and platforms and such. But yes, how can we leverage tools and AI? Like that's why I love that we have like a dedicated little like dev team to just work on that. If I get the chance, I get to dabble in it a little, but it's really amazing to see like we're making forward progress on it. But again, it's not one of those things we're just trying to slam a solution. We're not trying to slam, the square, you know, wooden thing into the circle peg and make it work. Like, it's not going to work. Like, we have to properly vet it, and it's just like with that solution and everything else, it gives us time to really hash it out, vet it, see where it works. How does it fit the model? And more so, how does it fit the business needs? Like, what's the goal? What's the outcome? Like you said, right, Andre? Like what are we trying to achieve? Because there has to be a thing or multiple things that you're trying to achieve when leveraging this. And I think I don't want to say half, maybe a little more, a little less. Like, some people see it that way. Be it, technical professionals, non-technical professionals. I think we're just still at that precipice of like, oh, this is cool. Like, I don't care. I just, like you said, if it can turn on my coffee maker, start my car, and do this, like, that's awesome. But because they're not security professionals, and I'm not saying you need to be a 20-year IT vet, like, you just need to kind of take a second and like stop, breathe, and like, okay, this is cool, but what's happening on the other side? And I think people are just like, I want my life to be easy, I want my day-to-day to be easy, I want how I, leverage these solutions to be easy, and that's it. All of the other problems are going to just filter their way out. And, fortunately, that's what me and Andrew, that's what we're here for, because we're the ones who are going to be like, hey, I had this problem, how come no one told me about this? And it's just like, back to square one. So I think it's really cool, like, where we're seeing it, but I still think there's that halfway or so point of people who are like really trying to be smart, both technical and not technical, about how we're vetting AI and how we're, leveraging it in our solutions day to day. And then I just think there's the other half that's just like, nah, I don't care. They want to be the cool kids in school, and they're going to use it, and that's that. And they'll worry about the problems later on. So.
Yeah, I really try to simplify it even more, right? Because the AI means a lot of different things to a lot of different people because there's different flavors of it. I try to take it back even simpler to talk about just the data because it's less of an AI problem and more of a data problem, right? And so if we can have a conversation about what you feel is important to you, what you feel is critical to you, and what are you okay with it just getting out there if it happens to get out. If I can get them to take that mindset of things, saying this is absolute cannot get to the internet. I don't care if this gets here. This is okay. Regardless of what happens with the model, we can have some level of governance over what goes out. But just having them take a step back to say what's critical, what's need to know, and what 100% can never get to the internet, it allows them to have that frame of reference. Because I think trying to explain AI to the common user above and beyond, hey, it can turn a thermostat on for you, is going to be kind of an exercise of futility. But if I can say, hey, listen, your daughter's social security card number, graduation date, et cetera, is in this information of data. Are you good with that being out? That resonates. And then I can get them to lock on the things that are important. And I can say, maybe this piece is important, but maybe you should keep these things kind of at bay. And so trying to bring them along slowly. We're never going to be able to catch up. And I love the way you said, right? If we get them to maybe test, if we can maybe get them to do the app test, we've been having that same conversation for 20 years. And Lord knows if we're not going to do it, they're definitely not going to do it. So I'm not even going to start that conversation. But what I will say is we don't air our dirty laundry in public for a reason, right? Okay, let's take that same approach to using AI and actually making the benefits of that work for us. And if you can do that in a way that's consistent or at least okay with you, right? I think we have a great place to start. I believe as we get further along and we build more into this and we find more commercially available systems, and I say commercially available because the support comes with that, the reputation comes with that, and traditionally speaking, then we build the controls as part of the process because as consumers, we demand that of the vendors. And I think we can find a better way to kind of, I think, marry the two. But until then, it is definitely, you get what you pay for. That's what I always say about open source. You get what you pay for. So know that going into the battle.
Yeah, I think overall this has highlighted for us that consumers of these tools want something to be simple. They don't want to have to think too much. There should be safe and secure defaults rather than wide open defaults, and it should be hard to turn those off. There should be governance somewhere in these platforms. There has to be for these things to be usable long term. But the reality is that consumers in particular and some parts of enterprise are going to want things before they're ready. They're going to want things immediately because that drives business differentiation. And the risk is always balancing that business differentiation, that business benefit against the business risk if things go completely sideways and all of our data goes floating out all over the internet, both personal data and company data. Now, we, as usual, could spend a long time talking about this. And if you are a delegate attending a Tech Field Day event, you will recognize these kinds of conversations as the ones that we have when we're not actually in the presentations at Tech Field Day events. But I've got to thank you as our listeners of the Tech Field Day podcast for joining us today on this episode. But before we go, if people want to catch up with you and continue this conversation, where can they find you all?
Like I said, you can find me, everyone, at gcavalinas on Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm on TikTok. I make short, long form content. You name it, I do it. Wherever books are sold, but I'm always around, especially on social media. So just reach out, say hello. Blessed to be a fellow Tech Field Day delegate. So I've done a few events. Hopefully, some more coming up soon. We'll see. And but yeah, love to continue this conversation anywhere. So follow me across all the platforms.
Probably not as much on TechField. I mean, not as much on social media. I tend to do more on LinkedIn, getting more involved with TechField. So I need your help on LinkedIn. Hopefully, again, getting more involved with TechField things, but also commonly speaking in the community. So most times when you find cybersecurity, you'll find me somewhere in the conversation.
And of course, I'm Alistair Cook. You can find me on LinkedIn as Alistair Cook. You can find me across all the various types of social media and the fragmented spaces. And you can find me on various Tech Field Day and Futurum Group properties around. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Tech Field Day podcast. If you enjoyed this discussion and would like to listen to some more of these discussions, please subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast application so you don't miss a single episode. Give us a rating as well, preferably a positive one and a nice review. That helps other people find these great conversations. This podcast was brought to you by Tech Field Day, the home of IT experts from across the enterprise and a part of the Futurum Group. For upcoming events and more episodes, head to techfieldday.com/podcast or view us on Techstrong TV. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kurt Kukine. I am Senior Director of AI Marketing for Hammerspace. And joining me on the call today, Sam, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, Sam Newnham. I run our AI solutions practice here at Hammerspace. We appreciate the time today.
Yeah, really excited to be here with everyone here in the room and online as well. Here's a brief agenda. So I'll be going over a quick recap of just what is Hammerspace, what is the Hammerspace, and what is Hammerspace, and how we do what we do, because it really takes a little bit of time to understand how we're differentiated from the typical storage company out there. We see ourselves much more as a data company. And so it's an important difference, especially with today's workload demands and infrastructure setups. Then I'll kick it over to Sam, and he'll be covering our NVIDIA AI data platform integration and why that extends what Hammerspace does into a whole new arena for folks who are deploying AI factories, and are looking to go from data chaos to AI-ready data. And then finally, I will give an update on the OpenFlash platform. We talked to the delegates at a previous field day about OFP and the initiative behind that, and we want to give you an update on practice. And rare for a software company like Hammerspace, I'll even have some hardware to feely touchy. Yeah, it's exciting. And I'll be joined by two folks, Ted and John from Hammerspace, to talk about why they're a key part of the initiative and our first reference design. All right, so the Hammerspace. Probably not so much for the people in the room, maybe a few people in the room haven't gotten this background before, but what is a Hammerspace? Right? And it is that infinite space that you see in an animated show where somebody's carrying a bag and then they maybe pull a giant hammer out of nowhere, right? It's this instantly accessible virtual space that is infinite in size. And so that's a pretty good analogy for what we do for our customers, right? We disaggregate the data from the underlying infrastructure and allow that data to be in any location, in any cloud, on any infrastructure backend, and eliminate the silos that are so common in today's enterprises. And we accelerate pipelines by aggregating the metadata that is attached to all of that data across the data estate, making the infrastructure more valuable because we can continue to use whatever data you have in place and continue to use those systems, but then also rapidly deploy newer, cheaper, faster technology, integrate those really easily into your environment. And with AI being such a big part of where we're generating data today, the need for this massive repository that sits across locations, clouds, and systems is really, really key. So a little bit of, background on AI, right? I don't think this is a question too much anymore, but I think we often focus as vendors on our really cool system, right? And we don't focus so much, especially in the storage space, on just how are people dealing with their data, right? And AI has really driven us as storage players to think differently. And we're not alone in that at Hammerspace, but, really going from where we were just serving files out, serving objects out, into being able to serve something that's really useful for these AI applications, right? We're not just repositories anymore. Now we are really, full data management systems. And what Hammerspace does is go beyond the systems view, right? And we want to give people visibility into all of their data, not just the data sitting on one system. We want to be able to give people access to all the data across locations, give people access to all the data and visibility across their clouds. And we need to be able to automate those data pipelines to provide AI-ready data, not just raw data out the front end. And we need to be able to do that in real time. And so I've covered these problem areas, but I'll dive into each of them a little bit more, right? So storage folks have been deploying systems for all sorts of rational reasons all over the place, right? And each system might have a unique characteristic, right? You might deploy object storage over here because you have this data repository that is going to grow, and you don't want it to, have onerous overhead. You want it to be easy to deploy, scale out. Then you have NAS systems that are scale up, maybe over on another side, because you had more enterprise, requirements for data protection and things like that. And you wanted it easy to share and easy to access for folks that didn't know anything about S3. Then you started deploying pieces in the cloud because there was this infinite bucket in the cloud that allowed you to ship data up there. But each of those new systems introduced complexity, additional data management overhead, all the things that comes along with distributed data. Similarly, you stand up a Western region, you've got another office in the East Coast, you've got another office in Europe, another office in Asia. All of these disconnected sites need to be able to collaborate, especially now that we're applying AI applications to be able to gain better insights into, everything that's spread out across the globe. So how do you unify that without massive migrations and multiple copies spread all over the place? Additionally, we encounter more and more customers. Yes.
Ray Lucchese, Silverton Consulting. You mentioned that you disaggregate data, but you aggregate metadata. You want to kind of...
I will dive deeper into that for sure.
Okay.
But essentially, right, that is Hammerspace's superpower, all right? So we assimilate the metadata from the underlying storage systems, whether it's an object storage or a NAS system from other system vendors out there. And then we have metadata servers that sit outside the data path that manage all of the data across those systems and aggregate it into a single global namespace. And then we can have data writing to those systems. So you can leave the data in place, or you can move the data based on where it needs to be, when it needs to be there. And you can continue to utilize that underlying system under Hammerspace's ownership.
That assimilation process happens instantaneously? Or
It's of course not
months?
instantaneously. It's a days. It's a days versus month thing. So when you look at, what is a typical system vendor going to come in and tell you is, how are we going to solve this problem? Well, we have the best system. We have the best new silo that's going to solve all your silo problems. So just deploy our system, migrate all your data into our system, and then you have a single global namespace. Instead, we say, leave all your data in place until you need to move it. So yes, there are cases where you're going to have to move your data, and that's, physics. But you don't have to move it all instantaneously. So that's a nice thing that when Hammerspace comes in, we're talking days to be able to stand up a global namespace as opposed to a gigantic migration process into our system. And so you get access to this global namespace really, really quickly. And I talk about that a little bit later in a couple of customer use cases too. Okay. So too many storage systems to manage, too many things out there. None of them meet all the needs, right? I mean, as we're approaching, infrastructure modernization, I think what is everybody trying to get to? And that's a single converged infrastructure. You need to be able to serve S3. You need to be able to serve a parallel file system, and then also, NFS, SMB, CSI, MCP. All of these things need to come from a single system, and we do all of that natively. And then we're very, very cloud friendly. We were built as software with a cloud-first mentality, so that to be able to, rather than viewing cloud as a destination where you just spill bits out and then hope that you never need to bring them back because that's a really expensive process, use the cloud as an extension of your on-prem infrastructure, right? And that speaks to, the whole first to cloud type of activity. And we can really help customers with an on-ramp to hybrid cloud settings. And then finally, data management across systems has often been another new tool that you need to bring in. And so instead, we bring data management into the storage layer and help people automate that via orchestration. And I'll go into that here in just a second.
This is Marion Newsom. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So you talked about aggregating the data from the metadata. How do you detect the drift, if there's any, between those two?
I will kick that one over to Sam. Sam, if you're available for a quick.
Yeah, the idea is to prevent data drift, right? It's one of the most poisonous things that happens in AI. So by owning the metadata, right, by separating that particular thing, we synchronize those changes real time, right, across our global namespace. And so we don't have some of that acknowledgement, wait for this to write type situation. And that's part of our secret sauce is how we can resolve some of those discrepancies in multi-writer situations and those types of things as well. But but our system was tuned to deal with this for Studio in the Sky, where we're doing multi-editing, right? Where we're doing AI pipelines, where data needs to live in multiple places but stay in sync. And so the beauty of that is that by separating metadata, we know those changes can happen instantaneously while we deal with the payload of those files moving to those geographic locations. So we can actually do, say, a LS on both sides of the world, see everything perfectly, but the data may still be in transit from a physical standpoint.
Thank you.
So one other emerging problem that we've got in real time is dealing with flash memory, right? And there's currently a pretty tight market for flash memory, whereas maybe a year ago, storage vendors were out there saying, oh, disk is dead. Well, now that nobody can actually buy flash, or flash is going up 2x in price because of this really tight market, we've got issues, right? And so if you can't even acquire new flash, but you still need high performance storage, what do? Right? And there's all sorts of ways that the system vendors are going about this. Let's go out and do a buyback program so we can get some more flash in and then resell that to other customers. I think it's a pretty, I don't want to make light of the situation because it's a pretty dire situation for customers who really, really need that capacity. But our view is that there is actually underutilized flash storage probably out there in many environments, right? You've stood up these multiple systems. They're all disconnected. They have an application running on system 1. You have application B running on system 2, application C, and all of those consumption patterns are not the same. So if you can aggregate those systems and use orchestration to make sure the right data is sitting on the right tier of storage, then you can free up some flash space within your environment. You can make sure you're utilizing all of that flash space, that it's already sitting there within the systems you have. We also have the capability, and we talked about it at the last field day presentation, a relatively new one that was introduced about 8 months ago, and that's Tier 0. So that's the ability to consume the flash that's within the compute cluster, CPU and GPU clusters, and aggregate that within our namespace. And so we set that up as a Tier 0. It's a extra high performance tier because you eliminate all of the network latency, and that's the flash that's sitting in the GPU and CPU servers. And we can incorporate that as part of the namespace and utilize that as a tier of very, very high performance storage. And if you look at most of the GPU and CPU clusters out there, they do have underutilized local flash storage that we can access and add to the global data file system. And then finally, I mentioned this already, but treat cloud as an extension of the infrastructure, not a destination. So, right, the cloud vendors have pretty good allocations of flash storage, but they aren't running into just availability problems. Now, probably not cheap, but at least you have access to that cloud instance, and you can treat that as an extension of your namespace that's both on-prem and in the cloud. So how do we do it? So you can deploy Hammerspace. It's software defined. We do have reference architectures and look for more news coming soon on other ways to deploy Hammerspace. But we can deploy on virtually any server in front of any storage, including local NVMe, as well as anywhere, right, within an environment. So data in place assimilation. Here was Ray's question, right? So data stays in place and we assimilate the metadata into our Anvil server. I'll have a little diagram of that here soon. And data is visible to users within minutes. right? So again, we're not doing an onerous long-term migration process. We're assimilating that data in place, and then users see everything that they're authorized to use. And from there, we provide a parallel file system access to a cluster, or standard S3, NFS, SMB access to other clients that are, heterogeneous within the environment. And so we can accelerate data that has been sitting on legacy file systems or object storage that's not tuned for high performance workloads that the GPUs demand, while also managing all of that storage underneath. And then finally, right, I think the most important point here, and the thing that we are going to exploit when we talk about the AIDP integration with NVIDIA, is all of the automated orchestration that we can do underneath the scenes, right? So as Sam mentioned, we can move data, right, across locations, between systems, even doing so while it's being written to. And we can set up policies based on normal business language that allow people to tier their storage as necessary based on their individual requirements.
Hey, Kurt, it's Ray Lucchese, Silverton Consulting. You mentioned earlier MCP. Do you provide MCP server for agents to be able to move the data based on where they think they might need it, things of that nature?
We do. And so Sam, that's exactly what Sam's going to be talking about with our AIDP solution. So that's where it really turns into something truly, I think, mind-blowing, where you go from this really, complicated management schema. And, none of this is easy. Right? I don't want to make it sound like, under the covers, everything is super seamless, right? But we go from something that, takes some storage management and storage intuition and experience, and are able to turn it into basically a system that can interact with you via natural language. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So here are the building blocks, right, of the Hammerspace deployment. So you've got the metadata control plane with the Anvil servers, and then essentially the data service nodes. And those are the things that provide file access as well as do the data movement. And so we can use PNFS, right, v4.2, which is integrated into every current Linux version that's out there today, for folks to do high performance parallel file system access to the data within a Hammerspace namespace, as well, again, as your standard multi-protocol file and object access for folks who are doing heterogeneous clients, for all sorts of.
Talk a little bit about how you cluster these various different types of nodes as well. I mean, I assume that you have some way of clustering them so there's redundancy and,
Yeah, Sam, you want to?
Remote availability.
Yeah, exactly. There's HA and durability, right, built into the architecture of these platforms. And so part of this thing, kind of like a ring architecture, right? And so part of those anvils will live at each side, right, controlling local metadata and the storage that's there. And those, are then replicated at other areas in those particular sites, right? And so that's kind of how Kurt talked about how we do this out of band, right? But yeah, we cover all sorts of reliability and durability, right? Up to 99.999, however far we get in that particular architecture, right? Like most systems, are always a trade-off between, how transient's that data, how much do we care, where do we want to do, especially with cloud resources. But our architecture is fully redundant across the entire platform.
I guess, follow on to Andy's question. So the redundancy, so some storage systems have redundancy built in, some do not. You're talking, I assume, about the Anvil metadata being redundant. I understand how that would be completely under your control, but let's say I have some dumb server storage and I want to have some sort of high availability for that. Do you provide I guess I'd call it external RAID across.
Yeah, so we do erasure coding across those, we can do it across storage systems, right, to provide redundancy
Okay.
for the data.
Yeah, the other point real quick is that all this is done via policy and orchestration. So by share, right? So not even by storage box, right? But by share, by data type, we can choose to keep multiple copies of that data spread across different geographic locations, or to Kurt's point, whether it's erasure coded or whether it's stored locally across a handful of servers. So we've got a lot of flexibility in how we do that, very granular, right? So it doesn't even have to be a master policy. We can do that specific to projects, specific to shares, or specific to organizations.
Yeah, my question was more specifically how you handled the cluster of your metadata nodes, and I think that you answered it adequately. That they're fully resilient. If you lose any one of them, you're still fine.
Correct. Yeah. Today they're in an HA pair. We're changing that to be fully containerized and scale out. So we'll be able to add performance as we add containers. Same with the DSX, right? Those data movers and some of those components, right? We can scale those today. In fact, we already have some customers that do early access in that containerized format. But today it's HA, but to your point, that's fully replicated across our environment.
The Marion Newsom, I have a question. How do you prevent privileged access on those different sets of data?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
How do you keep the privileged access the same across those different sets of data, like the S3?
No, exactly. So this is kind of the beauty of a single namespace, right? Is that right now those are all managed silos, right? We see people sometimes do direct permissions into an individual NAS, Active Directory, those sorts of things. By actually tying those directory systems into our platform, we inherit those default permissions, right? So that's part of understanding the POSIX landscape perfectly. So we can pull those particular things in. And I'll talk about this in my section a little bit, but the beauty is what we're aiming for, right? Is that security isn't tied now to where data is born, that security can now follow that data. And that's the beauty of separating the metadata from the storage itself, is that now those permissions can follow that data, whether they live in the cloud, live on a different storage platform, et cetera. And so we move that security plane into our metadata global namespace realm.
And so if I'm a company with cross-border data concerns or AI regulations, that's what that solution will provide.
Exactly. We can set up all sorts of policies, whether it's GDPR to prevent things cross country, whether it's certain patent information. We can do some custom metadata tagging. In fact, we're actually doing some integration with some digital security posture management companies and stuff as well, right? That take even our file system attributes well beyond that to be able to really control at a granular level what data should or should not live in certain places.
If I'm ever audited, could I ever see the logs to that?
I'm sorry.
If I get audited, can I pull the logs from my regulators?
Correct. Yeah, the whole thing is fully audited, right? Where files have moved, who's access to everything. That entire premise is built into our solution.
Thank you.
And I think there was an important point that Sam made there that maybe have been lost and I hadn't mentioned yet. And that is, we definitely go well beyond a storage system in terms of the amount and the type of metadata that you can attach to any object within our global namespace. So that allows you to take additional steps, right, based on business rules to be able to interact with that metadata. So it's not just, your POSIX metadata of file create and permissions and things like that, but you can attach other attributes onto that data, which again becomes important when you get to managing a system for AI. I'm going to go through this quickly here, just so we can jump over to the next section. But I want to talk a little bit about how our customers are using Hammerspace today. Here's an example of a large digital payments company. And they had a team of about 3,000 data scientists and research engineers who are building AI applications. And they were looking to move off of their fairly expensive, up for renewal NAS systems, and they wanted to deploy object storage, cheap and deep storage, cheap and wide storage, I guess, for their data scientists. And they started this process and then figured out that, oh, our data scientists don't speak S3. They speak NFS. So what do we do here, right? And, there's systems that you can put a bridge in front of an object storage. Those are integrated to more or less extent, but typically don't provide you very good performance when you're accessing that object storage through some kind of gateway. But instead, with Hammer Space, right, we can put that in front of the object storage, still take advantage of that scale out architecture, but now provide parallel file system access for a cluster, as well as all of the other access protocols natively, right? And so we also extended then into GCP so that they had burstable capacity for additional GPUs when and if they need them, as well as now a fully tiered environment that was NVMe for tier 1 storage, and then this object storage on the back end and cloud as needed, reducing storage costs. Their renewal license basically came down by $5 million. The other thing is now their users are only looking for the data in a single place, right? They aren't looking across file systems, across object storage. It's a single global namespace, no matter where the data lives. Greatly simplifies their workflows. And now they have agility to be able to utilize both on-prem and cloud resources. Here's another customer who ran into the performance issue, right? They were looking to deploy this new set of NVIDIA servers that now demanded, 3-4x the performance that they had been providing from their storage systems. But they weren't looking to, up their storage by 3 to 4x. So instead of buying a bunch more storage systems, or perhaps, some kind of bespoke parallel file system solution, right? They brought in Hammer Space. We could still continue to leverage the systems that they had invested in, their NAS systems, so those stay in place, can be used both with data in place and then also as an extra archive tier. And then we deployed our own NVMe storage behind. So I did want to emphasize that we don't just use other people's storage as a backend. We can deploy our own storage as well. So we do have storage boxes to be able to support customers in their deployments, and that's just standard commodity-based storage servers.
Yeah. Frederick van Haren from High Fence Consulting. So I do definitely see the value on the training side, with the metadata being available all over the place, but your data might be delayed. How does that work for inference? Do you see the product working well on inference, considering that your data might be slightly delayed? Where we talk about a little bit latency, where on the inference side, latency is kind of a key factor.
Yeah, I think, I guess fundamentally, what are you changing from data being remote or local, in the situation, right? We are going to bring the data as close as possible to the GPU, right? For, again, under the covers, can do that based on policy. As a object is, accessed, we can then bring the entire project into the local NVMe. So I don't think we're necessarily at a disadvantage. Yes, if you had migrated all of your data into a bespoke file system, right, and then connected that up to your GPUs, then yes, but I think then you're looking at a massive one-time migration, which takes time, right? So it depends on where you want to spend your time.
So if I understand it correctly, there is a way to create a profile where you kind of preload the data.
So Sam will talk about that
Okay.
here in just.
Frederick, we can spend some more time over this. We do have a number of customers that are using us for global inference, right? So when they're using tier 0 for incredibly fast performance, right? Holding model repositories, information that's been created. We then use a bunch of policies to drag that back, right? To continue to do some fine tuning or some updates of those things. But they also use us to sync vector database information to those sorts of things. And at that point, we're up against the speed of light problem, right? But they still find value in the fact that this all happens through policy and automation rather than this like spray and RC problem they've been running against. So I can show you a couple of designs where we're helping those particular inference farms, especially when they're trying to your point, keep latency low by moving inference close to the user, but still keeping data sets intact, right, across those particular farms.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I'm going to skip over this slide. It's what we do. We're helping tame the data chaos with a single unified global namespace. Now you'll notice here, right, I'm just talking about the unified namespace plugging into an AI factory. But there's an important part of the prep and rest of the data flow or the pipeline, right, for AI data that maybe we hadn't touched in the past. And that is getting data truly AI ready, right? We were a storage system that provided data, raw data at the front end. Now with AIDP, we're truly unlocking all of the value that is within the data.